Jazmyne is a speculative fiction writer and teacher and teaching artist for Kitchen Table, Literary Arts, and Grub Street Writers. She received her MFA in creative writing at the University of Tampa. Her work has appeared in Midnight and Indigo, African Writers Magazine, Ekphrastic Exhibition, in Tandem, Back and Forth. I'm hoping I pronounced that exhibition correctly. But Silk, take it over for you.
Thank you. So right now I am working on a novel and stories called Lioness Valkyrie of Ognas. So tonight I'm going to be reading two stories. They're fairly short, so they're within the time. So the first story is titled The Sage Apprentice and the Lioness Valkyrie. We met over blood and licorice in 26 ACC. She was 17, I was 18. I was an apprentice of the exalted sage, my Aunt Helen. As a noble and a healer, I was at Lioness Valkyrie's naming day ceremony 4 years prior. Everyone loved her, a strong heir to the throne. Many people clapped her father, King Haroun's back or shoulder in awe of her. It was why he and her uncle, the royal guard, allowed her into battle in the first place. Lioness Valkyrie is coming, my mentor told me as we walked down the hall from the main to the royal infirmary. You will be the one to handle her wound. She opened the door for me, waved me into the room. Instead of the usual 6 tables of the main, there were only 2 ash wood ones. She walked to the prepping station to our left and began to collect metal instruments I would need. The royal guard says it's flesh, but it's very, very deep. It's not the wound per se, I told her. She's the future of the crown. She's a patient, my mentor told me. I suggest get focused, clean and dress the wound properly. She handed me the bowl of instruments. Skirmishes are good for business, but bad for the kingdom. The Colossi conflicts had been declared over more than 20 years ago, but every so often rogue bands would cross the northern border and terrorize the villagers of Valheim. The first stop on the way to the castle. Small enough to not need the main army, but still required the appearance of the sentinels, it was the perfect time for her to taste battle and lead a small squadron of her own. Calm your nerves, my mentor told me. I walked to the fireplace in the back of the corner of the room next to the open window. Assess the wound properly. I nodded, wiped the sweat on my smock. I held the tools in front of me in the fire, the flames licking at the metal, warming them, my palms moist from the temperature. 3 men carried in Lioness Valkyrie. Here, I told them, motioning to the wood table next to me. My hands were shaking as I washed them in the basin next to the fireplace. What exactly is her wound? I turned and dried my hands. A deep gash in her back. She was crying in pain, her red locks pulled into a messy bun. The weapon? I pulled the licorice from my smock. Longsword. What was the attacker's build? I crouched down so I could meet her eyes. Beautiful brown with specks of gold. Chew this, I told her, extended the root. She opened her mouth, causing a tear to fall. I placed it in, and she bit down. I have you now, I told her. Spirit will guide my hands. She nodded, sniffled. Make sure to swallow. Don't spit. I stood back up. Medium build like mine, one of the sentinels said. I removed the tethered tunic pieces to expose her back. Downward slash. I'm going to remove these leaves now, I told the lioness. That's good information, I said to the sentinel. The wound was bright red like the blood that poured from it. You did good, I told him. I leaned down, inhaled the flesh. Good, no sign of infection. We rinsed and changed both days until we got here, he told me. We debated using fire, but Commander Roy instructed us to only clean and change if we weren't sure. Wise men, my mentor said. I wonder who taught him. I'm sure you, exalted sage. Do you have enough information, apprentice? My mentor asked me. Exalted sage to the court, mentor to me. I'd been entrusted to her for 5 years. I believe so, I replied while removing the remaining leaf. It would be many more years before I would be the sage, so she had to keep careful eyes on me until then. Lioness Valkyrie wasn't my first lead, but the first of royal blood. Exalted Sage had treated King Haroun himself and his trusted Commander Roy and the leader of the Sentinels. It was a beautiful wound. The blade must have been pristinely sharp. Dermis tissue on full display. Leona's cries had stifled into groans. The licorice doing its job, it was time for me to begin mine. This is going to be painful, I told her as I grabbed the bowl with my mentor's special mixture. She reached for my other hand, grabbed it, and I was almost distracted by how soft it was. Locks at her shoulders, she was a beautiful, handsome heir. Her muscles taut and rippled, her bicep tightening and relaxing, a specimen of human physique. Apprentice, my mentor stirred me. Their essence has that effect, she said. Back to work. The Ognas had lion's blood. The court rumored about how, but only the exalted sage, and I knew the truth. I was 16 when my mentor told me that their ancestor had been lost in a dry forest where the tree roots grow on top of the ground. She was scouting ahead and had been approached by a lioness with a black mane. In order to be allowed to keep passing through, she had to be tested. So she extended her forearm and was bitten by the lion. She'd fallen into a deep sleep for 3 days, and when she woke, she found her senses heightened. She didn't know she was already with child. I gave the lioness's hand a squeeze. She squeezed back and then let go. I slowly poured the concoction onto the top of the wound. A growl greeted me. Are you okay? The locks shifted as her head nodded. I used the brush to continue applying the salve down the length of the wood. From left shoulder to right hip, I could see that the same hand grasping the table so hard the wood began to splinter. You have to work fast before her essence takes over, my mentor reminded me. It'd be bad for lion hair to start growing over the flesh, and it would complicate the process. For the most part, Ognas existed in their human counterparts, but when the time called, they could call their lion forward. Lioness Valkyrie, I called her by her name. I need you to hold on. You've probably never had an injury this extensive, but I'll let you know when your essence can take over. Please just keep on holding on. Her hold on the table was released. There was a grumble. I'm sorry, I can't hear you. The licorice thudded onto the table. I need you to hurry up. I'm not exactly taking my time, I told her as I finished pouring. She let out a scream when the ingredients stuck to the dermis. I'm telling my father, she wheezed. I looked at my mentor, who shrugged. I can assure you King Haroon would be glad for me saving the heir's life. I grabbed a clean cloth and began to pat away at the excess liquid on her back, the muscles responding. Well, that's good. Looks like the nerves aren't damaged, I said to my mentor. She nodded, handed me the fishing wire and metal hook. Now it's time for the salve, I said to my patient as I dug my fingertips into the greenish cloth. I traced lightly over the edges of the wound where I'd need to put my thread to sew her up. How does it feel? Even better than the licorice, she replied. Can I keep this? Absolutely not, I paused. Lioness Valkyrie. Oh, now you choose formality. Would you let me work? She was handsome. During the spring solstice, she'd sat next to her father in a gold tunic, exposing biceps that looked like they'd been carved by the blacksmith. She caught my eyes over the rim of her golden goblet with rubies. We'd been sharing moments like that for years. The only time I was able to congregate was formal events because my studies were all consuming. Yes, that should be sound, my mentor said. Lioness Valkyrie, shaky hands are for an uneven scar. My hands are not shaky. I looked down to see them trembling. I took a deep breath and whispered, Spirit, guide my hands and allow them to be a vessel for this work. Ashe. Thank you.